May I now invite Mr. Harsh Srivastava, CEO of Center for Civil Society, to speak on functional literacy. Mr. Harsh Srivastava.
Harsh Srivastava, Chief Operations Officer, Center of Civil Society, is a commerce graduate and completed an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Having worked in the Planning Commission, the Prime Minister's Office, the CII, in companies of varied sizes, and even as a journalist and as an NGO worker, he understands the big picture and how different parts contribute to making it. He is a specialist in public policy and communications, interested in the interlinkages between politics, policies, and profits. He has authored several publications and books, including India's first book on CSR, a handbook for company managers on how to do CSR governance now. At present, he is Chief Operations Officer of Center of Civil Society, one of Asia's top think tanks, working in the areas of education, livelihood, and in advancing economic, social, and political freedom for all. He advises MBA students to pursue a non-traditional career, and we are indeed privileged to welcome Harsh Srivastava.
Thank you for a very, very glowing introduction. I wanted to talk today about literacy and adult literacy. And while I work, and my organization works on education for children, and we've seen today and yesterday and over the years that how children and their education is being given so much attention, so many different bodies, so many agencies. Just before us, we talked about teacher training, about the challenges of getting teachers and children to school. I want to talk about adults, about people who are above 18. How can we get them to be literate? My belief is that while we are doing a lot on education for children, we are not doing enough on adult literacy. This is not a new problem. In India, set up a Directorate of Adult Education in 1956, and a National Literacy Mission was launched in 1988. But yet, India's adult literacy is only 74%. The world average is 84%, and next door, Myanmar has 90%. So we have a long way to go in adult literacy. I also think that focusing on adult literacy is possibly more important than focusing, or at least as important as focusing on children in education. If you spend a lot of effort in getting teachers to do good stuff, schools to be functional, to have toilets and bathrooms, in 10 or 12 years from now, the children who go out, they will be better adults and more productive workers in the economy. But if you improve the abilities and capabilities of adults, tomorrow they will be able to do a better job at what they're doing. So perhaps it is while education as a whole is an important problem, adult literacy, I think, is an urgent problem. And that's why I'm very glad that the A in your teach is about adult literacy. I'm going to talk now about functional literacy and why I think that is so important. Functional literacy, therefore, comes from the word functions, and there are different elements of, therefore, what functional literacy we need. It's not just, normally you think about literacy as, okay, can you read and write and sign your language? That's enough. If you do that, that's all we need. I believe that to make adults functionally literate, you have to look at many, many, many classes of functional literacy, and I'm going to talk about a few of them. I'd like to start with the challenge of teaching all adults, the 304 million people that a previous speaker referred to, as making them financially literate. How do you explain to everybody what it is to have a bank account, what it is to have proper insurance and not more than you need, what is a pension fund, what is a mutual fund, what are savings functions? So if you can teach everybody the basics of financial literacy, then they would be in a much better position to look after their own finances. We are not, in South Asia, we're not rich enough yet that the government will provide a universal pension and take care of your future. All of us need to be financially literate. The next thing I'd like to talk about is adult literacy, which is legal literacy, And that, I believe, is things about, for instance, especially the literate, if are the poorest. And, they're usually troubled the most, for example, by the police. So when I talk about legal literacy, I mean basic knowledge of what can the police do to you or not do to you. What are your rights as a citizen? What can you do? So if you teach every person, an illiterate person, the basics of legal literacy, she or he can do a life which is not full of fear and not full of, oh, what will happen to me tomorrow. There's another challenge of literacy, which is the challenge of making what I would call government literacy, which is about, what are the various government schemes that are applicable to the citizens? What do they mean? How do I, access them? Every government, whether in India or in Pakistan or in Nepal, has all kinds of schemes and programs for citizens. And they keep getting new ones announced every Independence Day. But the challenge really is they're not implemented because the person who's supposed to benefit from them, she or he doesn't know what they are. And even if they knew what they are, they don't know, so where can I get some information? What do I do about it? So one more element of literacy, of functional literacy, is literacy about government schemes and government programs. Another element of literacy, which one of my pre-speakers has talked about, was digital literacy. The challenge of understanding what you can do with the internet. Almost every person in South Asia is, by 2017 certainly, going to have a mobile phone. But beyond using it to speak, what else can they do with their mobile phone? How can they use all the things that we talked about, not just Facebook and Twitter, but even simple email that most of us take for granted, or browsing the net to figure out where they stand vis-a-vis a government scheme, or have they got the loan being sanctioned. So using digital literacy, going beyond the mobile phone. The next challenge, I think, is the challenge of health literacy. Simple things that we learned in school but everyone don't remember is washing your hands. What is preventive health? What is the challenge of nutrition, and how do you eat simpler food? Those of us who are privileged and come from well-educated and wealthy families, we are bombarded by things about how to live a more productive and healthy life. But if you're a poor person, you don't know this and you end up eating unhealthy food, and which in future will cause you more health problems. So I would also count health literacy as one of the elements of functional literacy. Then I think, there's a big challenge to understand, for all of us, what is economic literacy. We go through life and without understanding the basics of what is demand, what is supply, what is productivity, how does that improve the long-term growth of our country, what is inflation, how does inflation come about. All of us, in some sense or the other, are economic agents. We are driven by an economy, we contribute to an economy, we consume the products and services of an economy. So imagine if our maids and drivers and others knew all about, or the street workers, the pushcart vendors knew what is an economy, how does it work for them, what can they contribute, how much more productive they would be. That brings me to the next element of what contributes functional literacy. And I talk about what I think is business literacy. Most of the people who are illiterate today are also working somewhere and contributing their labor. They might be a marginalized laborer, they might be a pushcart vendor, they might be a shopkeeper, they might be a restaurant owner, but they're all contributing in a market economy. So if we can teach at some stage the basics of what is competition, what is the basics of a profit, how do you be a better businessman? Even if you're a businessman, only one person, you're still a businessman. You're still competing in a market. Even if you're a vegetable seller on the streets, you're still competing in a market every day. And linked to that, as a business person, if you can understand what are the various regulations that govern you. Most people, the laws and the rules that support or don't support or prohibit, occupations aren't very clear. So can you actually run your pushcart in a particular place, or that is illegal? Can you be a cycle rickshaw vendor? Can you, if you have to start a small business, what are the rules applicable to you? So all of these I would put on the bucket of business literacy. Then I think, all of us in South Asia at least realize that we are in complicated countries which are multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multicultural. So if we can have one element of functional literacy which sort of teaches all of us, and especially the literate, what is our large and complex nation? What across the different states, across regions, across communities. So if somebody who's an illiterate worker in the Northeast can get a sense of what is Kashmir all about, or what is Kanyakumari about, or what is, so taking, say, Pakistan, somebody in in Sindh can understand what what is so special about the Northwest Frontier Province, or now I think it's called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So, these are the elements, if I think about it: financial, legal, government, digital, health, economic, business, and literacy about our culture, that I think together make what is, I would call, functional literacy. And if we can do this, we would have achieved a really big thing across all the millions and hundreds of millions of people. So then, how would we do this? And my organization works on economic reforms as well, and as you've heard from, I think I have an MBA, so I'm going to talk from the demand and supply side, economics language. How could you solve this problem using both supply and demand tools? Start with, I think, if you can increase the supply of various, what I would call, literacy centers. If you would create, small places in the locality where the local non-literate adults, the maids, the shopkeepers, the laborers, the drivers and others, can come in the evening, and learn something about literacy, about all the elements that I've talked about. They may be given a cup of tea as well. So this is something that I think if we can create this network and use that to provide literacy training to a lot of people in the neighborhood, we would achieve a lot. And actually, in India at least, these things already exist. The government runs something called Jan Shiksha Sansthans. There are very few, they're probably very badly run, like most government institutions. But if all the local Rotary districts could just adopt the nearby Jan Shiksha Sansthan, ensure that they're working, ensure that they're providing the service that they're supposed to provide, and add more services, you would probably, and build more such Jan Shiksha Sansthans in different parts of where they live, where the Rotarians live. You could create a place where functional literacy is taught to many, many more people. Then if you think about demand, how would you increase the demand? So I think there is a way that if the government was to think about what we call vouchers, that you provide each adult citizen a sum of money, now the government calls it a direct benefit transfer, which they can, or you give them a piece of paper that says you can go to any place where you want training. So if you know the basics about reading and writing, but you don't know the basics about business, maybe there is a training provider that will give you a 2-day training module on business. Or there is some young lawyers who have provided a place where they'll teach you the basics of legal education. And you can redeem that voucher for whatever training that you think you need. So every year, if the government has decided, we could give each person a voucher worth 500 rupees, and they can go to whichever training provider they want. And if they want to spend a little bit of their own money, they can add to that and learn a few more things. So I may know how to use a mobile phone, but I don't know how to use the net, and I'm willing to pay a little bit of money. So if you empower each adult illiterate with a little bit of money, and if they have the money to go, then various training providers will sort of automatically pop up, because they know that they're going to get a guaranteed revenue when 20 or 30 or 50 or 200 men and women are coming to their center to learn some basics of functional literacy. So that may be a way to promote from the demand side by empowering people, and it doesn't cost very much really to provide. And here's where the Rotarians can either act as a top-up, that okay, if the government gives everybody 500 rupees, we will give you another 200 rupees more to go and study some more skills. So, if I think about this, then there is a third way, of course, we can do, which you're already doing, which is using technology. The CD in your bag, the gadget that was shown here. So these are the ways that one can also use to expand, functional literacy across the millions and millions of people that we need to reach out to. And while the tablet is a great idea, what I think really need to figure out is how every mobile phone, since everybody has a mobile phone, even if they have a basic mobile phone, can deliver some elements of literacy even through a daily SMS or maybe 5 SMS a day. So if you have a smartphone that is linked to the net and you have Android or iPhone or BlackBerry, then you can do something. But if you have a simple phone, what can you do with that? So maybe we should think about how we can use the simplest phone, that is what the poorest persons use, to reduce literacy. And I believe that if we invest in adult literacy, even if we invest 1/10 the amount of money that we're investing in education for children and schools, we can also reduce the widening inequality that we are seeing in our nation. There is a huge inequality between those who are educated and those who aren't. So 10 years later, as this cohort of children, or 5 years later, as this cohort of children pass out of schools, they will reduce their inequality. But today, if we can invest in adult literacy, we will solve this inequality. So therefore, my last point is that, 2017 is a very good goal, but I'm just sort of giving you 3 years more leeway and say 2020, which was 100 years from when Rotary International first came to India. In 2020, if 300 million adult illiterates are made functionally literate across all the parameters that I have mentioned, I think that's the greatest thing possible. And you know what? I think it will also add to our country's GDP growth by probably at least a percentage point more. And to all the other countries in South Asia, investing in adult illiteracy probably makes your countries and states grow faster. Thank you so much.